What kind of woman walks alone to a mountain mansion in the freezing snow, knowing 17 others were rejected before her? The iron gate stood closed in front of Sarah Flores, tall and dark against the white snow that covered the mountain. She placed her cold hand on the metal, feeling it bite into her skin. The wind rushed through the peaks above as if warning her to turn back. Behind that gate was the home of Stephen Johnson, the man people in town called the Mountain King, a man who refused every bride who came to win his hand. 17 women had come up this same road. They had arrived in fancy carriages, wearing fine coats and carrying dowries, letters, and promises. They came with pride and confidence, certain they would walk into that grand house as his future wife. Not one made it past the gate. Sarah came with none of those things. No carriage, no fancy clothes, no family name, no belongings except the thin shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She arrived with only one thing left inside her, the small piece of hope she refused to let die. Her breath turned white in the bitter air. Every second she stood there made her think of what waited for her if she failed. The boarding house where she stayed would not keep her much longer. Her money was almost gone. Rejection today would mean something worse than embarrassment. It would mean hunger, cold, and fear. It would mean the slow fall toward a life she could not survive. People in town whispered that Stephen Johnson's heart was as cold as the mountain he lived on. They said wealth had frozen his soul. Sarah had watched the rejected brides return to town in tears, their families looking broken with shame. She saw the carriages roll down the road past her window at the boarding house. Girls who arrived proud left looking smaller than when they came. Still, here she was. The gate rose high above her, 12 feet tall, with sharp iron points at the top. In the middle, a crest was carved into the metal, a mountain peak with stars above it. It looked strong, permanent, and cold. Everything she wasn't. Sarah was 23. No family, no wealth, no dowry. She had nothing that would make a man like Stephen Johnson choose her. But she had courage that had been built through years of hardship. She had buried both parents before turning 20. She worked any job she could to survive. Sewing, cooking, cleaning. Life had taught her how to stand when everything tried to push her down. The wind hit her hard, making her whole body shake. Her boots were thin and soaked through. Her gloves did little against the cold. She pulled her shawl tighter. She knew she could still turn around. She could walk back down that road. No one would blame her. But if she left, she would give up the last chance she had. She reached for the bell rope beside the gate. It was stiff with ice. She pulled it. The bell rang deep through the valley. The sound was heavy, like a church bell at a funeral. When it stopped, silence returned. Only the wind spoke. Sarah waited. 1 minute. 2. 5. Her fingers were going numb. Her toes burned with cold so sharp it almost hurt to breathe. Maybe no one would come. Maybe this was her end. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Slow and steady, crunching on the snow-covered gravel path beyond the gate. A man came into view between the tall pine trees. Broad shoulders, strong build. He walked like a man used to working with his hands. He stopped just a few feet from the gate. Stephen Johnson. Not a cruel-looking man like the stories said. Not a proud prince from a rich house either. He looked like a man shaped by wind, sun, hardship, and long winter nights. About 35, dark hair with silver showing early. Pale blue eyes that held no warmth but something sharper, like he saw more than other people did. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. "You're late," he said. His voice was low, calm, and carried a light accent she couldn't place. "I'm not the others," Sarah said. Her voice was steady, surprising even herself. A small shift came into his eyes. Not quite a smile. Not anger either, just interest. A rare thing for a man who turned away every woman who came to him. "No," he said. "You're not." He waited, clearly expecting a long, practiced speech like the others must have given. Sarah had rehearsed many times, But standing here now, looking at him, every planned word faded. "I know what they say about you," Sarah said honestly, letting the cold truth leave her lips in a cloud of white. "They say you are cruel. They say you enjoy turning women away. And yet you came," he said, "yes, because I have nowhere else to go." The truth hung between them, cold and painful. Most women would have tried to charm him. Most would have lied to look worthy. But Sarah had nothing left to hide. Her pride had been lost long ago. He watched her with unreadable eyes. Snow blew between them. Still, she didn't look away. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah Flores." "And what do you want from me, Sarah Flores?" This was the moment that would decide everything. One wrong word, and she would be turned away like all the others. Sarah lifted her chin just enough to show she would not beg. "I want to survive," she said. "A roof, food, work. A place where I matter. I don't expect love. I don't expect happiness, only fairness." Silence. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a heavy key. Sarah's heart jumped. He placed the key into the lock and turned it. The gate opened slowly, with a rough sound of metal. He looked at her. "Come inside," he said. "We'll finish this where it's warm." Sarah stepped through. Her life was about to change. She felt it, but she had no idea how much. Warmth hit Sarah the moment she stepped inside the grand house. After the freezing wind outside, the heat felt almost painful as her skin began to thaw. The entry hall was wide and tall, with polished wood floors and a large staircase leading to the upper rooms. A soft glow from oil lamps lit the space, giving it a gentle golden light. Sarah swayed slightly as the warmth rushed through her body. Stephen noticed and reached out to steady her by the elbow. His touch was firm but careful, not unkind. "Mrs. Henderson," he called. A moment later, a woman around 60 years old appeared, wearing a neat dress and apron. Her gray hair was pulled into a tidy bun. The moment she saw Sarah, her eyes filled with concern. "Oh, the poor girl is frozen through," Mrs. Henderson said. "Come with me, dear, let's get you warm." Sarah tried to speak, but her lips were stiff. Mrs. Henderson removed her wet coat and shawl, then led her to a small sitting room where a fire burned bright in the hearth. A blanket was placed around her shoulders, and she was given warm soup and bread. Heat spread through her body as she ate, and the trembling finally slowed. Stephen stood nearby, watching quietly. He didn't rush her, didn't question her yet. He only waited. After some time, when color returned to Sarah's face, he spoke. "Better?" "Yes," she said softly. "Thank you." "You don't owe me thanks," he replied. "Not yet." His words reminded Sarah that nothing was decided. She was here only because he hadn't sent her back into the cold. She held the bowl tightly, bracing herself for whatever might come next. "Tell me who you are," Stephen said. "Not what you want. Who you are." Sarah took a slow breath. She told him about Silver Creek, the small farm her parents had run, the debts that took everything after they passed, and how she worked in different homes just to survive. She spoke without drama or self-pity, only facts. "You could have married," Stephen said. "I could have," she answered, "but not as a wife. Only as someone owned." He understood. He didn't ask more on that. "And you came here because you have nowhere else to go?" he asked. "Yes," she said simply. "But I will work for what I receive. I am not here to take advantage of you." Her honesty was steady. It surprised him, more than any promise wealth or beauty could have offered. After a long moment, Stephen leaned back in his chair. "The other women who came here wanted a position, wanted the name, the comfort, the status. You're the first to ask for a place." Sarah met his eyes. "I won't pretend to be something I'm not." For the first time, he gave a faint, barely noticeable smile. Over the next days, a quiet arrangement formed. Sarah was given a small room in the house, and she helped Mrs. Henderson with the home. She woke early, worked with care, and never complained. She listened more than she spoke. She moved through the large mansion with a calm presence that began to change its cold atmosphere. Stephen found himself noticing things about her. How she folded laundry with neat precision. How she hummed softly while mending clothes. How she listened with full attention when he spoke. Not because he was important, but because she cared to understand. Evenings became something new. Stephen would sit by the fireplace with his account books, and Sarah would sew or read. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. The silence between them was never tense. It felt peaceful. And for a man who had lived surrounded by wealth but alone, peace was rare. 3 weeks passed. Something in the house felt warmer, not in temperature, but in spirit. Stephen realized one evening that he looked forward to seeing Sarah at the end of the day. Her presence eased. Something inside him he hadn't known was tense. But peace never lasts long in a small town. One cold morning, raised voices sounded outside the front door. Stephen stepped out of his study at the same moment Sarah came from the dining room. The doorbell rang sharply, not like a visitor, but like a demand. Stephen opened the door. 3 men stood on the porch: Mayor Edward Ramirez, Sheriff Nathan Smith, and Councilman Kyle Walker. Their expressions were stiff, their posture full of judgment. "Gentlemen," Stephen said, "what brings you here?" They entered. Sarah stayed in the hallway, unsure if she should leave or stay. Stephen looked her way and gave a small nod. "Stay." In the sitting room, the men took seats like they sat in a courtroom. Stephen remained standing. "This is about the woman you have living here," Mayor Ramirez said. "Speak carefully," Stephen warned. Sheriff Smith folded his arms. "Stephen, she's an unmarried woman living alone with you. People are talking. It sets a bad example." Councilman Walker leaned forward. "There are proper ways for a man in your position to handle such things. If you must keep her, then do it away from public view. Set her up quietly. Don't pretend she is respectable." The insult hit the air like a slap. Sarah's heart dropped, but she stayed still. Stephen's jaw tightened. "Miss Flores," Stephen said sharply, "is respectable, more than any man who would suggest such a thing." The men exchanged looks. "You have 2 choices," the mayor said. "Either marry her or send her away, tonight." Sarah felt the world tilt. Marriage? She looked at Stephen, ready to release him from the trouble she had caused. "I'll leave," she said quietly. "I don't want to make things worse for you." Stephen stepped closer to her. "No, you will not." He turned to the men, anger controlled but fierce. "You think she is here at my mercy. You're wrong," Stephen said. His voice held a power none of them expected. "She is here because I asked her to be here." He turned to face Sarah fully, her breath caught. "Sarah," he said, his voice steady, "I had planned to ask you in private, but it seems the moment has been forced." He dropped to one knee. "Will you marry me?" "Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know." Silence filled the room as Stephen remained on one knee, holding Sarah's hands gently in his. Sarah stared down at him, her heart racing. She had never imagined a proposal like this. Not rushed, not forced by society's rules, not for show. "Stephen," she whispered, "you don't have to do this for them. I don't want you to choose marriage because of pressure." His eyes stayed on hers, steady and sure. "I'm not doing this for them," he said. "I'm doing it because somewhere in these last weeks you became someone I cannot imagine losing." Her breath caught. His voice was honest, calm, and full of a truth she felt deep inside. "I cannot promise the dramatic kind of love people talk about," Stephen continued, "but I can promise respect, partnership, protection, and a life where you will never stand at anyone's gate again begging for a place." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her with such sincerity. "What do you want from me if I say yes?" she asked softly. "What you've already given me," he said. "Honesty, loyalty, and your presence, nothing more." Sarah looked into his eyes and saw no lies, no pride, no coldness, just a man who meant every word. "Yes," she said, "yes, I will marry you." Stephen stood and pulled her into a gentle embrace. Sarah felt her heart settle into a peace she had never known. The three men on the couch shifted, surprised by the outcome, but Stephen did not look at them. "This conversation is over," he said firmly. "Now please leave. My fiancée and I have a wedding to plan." 3 weeks later, the small church in the valley was filled. Everyone came, some out of curiosity, some out of gossip, and a few with genuine happiness for the couple. Sarah walked down the aisle in a simple ivory dress that suited her natural grace. Stephen waited for her at the altar, dressed neatly, his eyes never leaving her face. When the vows were spoken, they weren't loud or grand. They were soft, sincere, and full of promise. When Stephen lifted her veil and kissed her, it felt like sealing a life built not on wealth or charm, but on truth. The reception at the mansion was warm and lively. Candlelight filled the rooms. Music played softly. Stephen stayed close to Sarah's side, guiding her, protecting her from overwhelming attention. Guests couldn't help but notice how he looked at her, not as a trophy, but as a woman he valued deeply. Later that night, after everyone had gone, they sat together by the fireplace in the library, where many of their quiet evenings had begun. "Do you regret it?" Stephen asked softly. "Any of it?" Quote. Sarah took a moment to answer with honesty, as she always did. "I regret that you had to face pressure for us to reach this moment," she said. "But I don't regret marrying you. Not for a second." Stephen nodded, his expression easing. "Neither do I." Months passed, and married life settled into something calm and steady. The mansion, once silent and cold, now felt alive. Sarah brought warmth everywhere, fresh flowers on tables, laughter with the staff, soft music in the evenings. Stephen found himself smiling more, speaking more, and feeling more than he ever expected. One evening, 6 months into their marriage, as they sat together in the library, Sarah turned to him. "I need to tell you something," she said gently. "Something I didn't understand at first." Stephen put away his papers and gave her his full attention. "I love you," Sarah said, "not because you gave me food or shelter, not because you saved me, but because of who you are, because you chose me when you didn't have to." Stephen held her gaze, his voice low with emotion. "Sarah, loving you was the last thing I expected in this life, but you filled a space in me that I didn't know was empty. I love you too." A year after that snowy night, Sarah stood again before the iron gate. Only this time, it was open. She was no longer a desperate stranger at the gate. She was the woman this home belonged to. The life she walked into that day was one she had helped shape through kindness, honesty, and quiet strength. Stephen joined her at the gate, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. "Every time I pass this gate," she said. "It reminds me that one brave step can change everything." Stephen smiled. "We built something here, didn't we?" "Yes," Sarah said, resting her head against his arm. "A life, a home, love that grew little by little, each day stronger than before." They walked back toward the mansion together, the lights glowing warmly through the windows. The house that was once silent and lonely now felt full, safe, and loving. A place where two hearts, once tired and guarded, learned to rest. Sarah had come seeking survival. She found a life. She found a partner. She found love. And together they continued building their future side by side, one day at a time.